Good morning, everyone, and welcome here. This is the second presentation we've done this summer. And as you know, the Worcester Radio Group has been on summer break through the months of July and August. And we've taken an opportunity to keep ourselves busy with a little mini series on different ham radio and technology related subjects. Last month, we had a fantastic presentation by Mark Walensky, K3MHW, all on grounding, grounding your antenna, grounding your station. And he was a perfect person to give that presentation. We have recorded that video. So if grounding is a subject that you're interested in, you can go to our YouTube channel and search for the Worcester Radio Group on YouTube, and you will find that video. So today we're going to talk all about Linux. And for those that don't know me, my name is Mark Shaw, K3WOC. I'm the president of the Worcester Radio Group, and I'm really happy to share some of this information with you guys today. Without further ado, we will jump right into it here. I've been working in the technology industry for about 27 years now. I started in 1998. It's hard to believe that that was 27 years ago. I started working for a company in West Ocean City, Maryland. If you guys are familiar where Northeastern Plumbing Supply is, that whole warehouse back there actually used to belong to a company called Patmos International. And we were a technology company. We had about 40 employees there and a research and development team. And I got an opportunity to come in for an interview thanks to a coworker over at Outback Steakhouse. So back when Outback Steakhouse first opened up in Ocean City, I was a busboy there, and one of the servers just so happened to work at Patmos. And I overheard a conversation between her and the bartender, and she was talking about her other job. And she was saying, yeah, we don't use Windows over there at all. We use something called Linux. And then that just made my ears perk right up. I was like, I know Linux. You know, I kind of tinker with Linux at home on some of my old computers. I talked to her and I was like, that's crazy. I've never heard about anybody else actually using this system before. And she was like, well, come on in and talk to us sometime because we're looking for anybody experienced in Linux. So I went in, met with the CEO, James Gatska, and he had just some amazing things to say. You know, he had some amazing things. He was a revolutionary guy, rest in peace. But back then, this was a really unique company. We built parallel computer systems for scientists, research groups, and universities. These were basically supercomputers. I was their network administrator, kind of like a tech support guy. We had about 40 employees there, and they created just some really amazing machines. And I found through what they call the Wayback Machine, if you guys are familiar with the Wayback Machine, through the website archive.org, there is a snapshot of our website from back in the late 90s. You can actually go back in time and find websites through the Wayback Machine. And this was the Patmos International website back in 1998, 99, and 2000. And we have some little artist renderings here of some of the machines that we developed. These were in large communication racks, network racks. And we had, again, a couple different machines. One was a 16-node machine, and the other one was a 4-node machine. And I'll talk a little bit about that. We called these the machines that think. And the reason being is like we had a centralized system that would kind of listen to all the other connected nodes that were in the server rack. And if one of them went down, if for any reason one of those computers in that network rack went down, then the central brain, which we called the limbics, would actually, it would take its place. It would spin up a virtualized instance of that node and be able to take its place. So we called it the machines that never went down, which was really cool. And again, this is back when server technology was still pretty new, and the idea of having redundant hardware to keep services up and running all the time was just a topic that we just started discussing in the industry. Our machines were meant to handle very complex tasks, such as weather simulations. We would break those processes down into smaller processes that could be handled by an array of computers that we called nodes in what was essentially a cluster. And then we would take 4, 8, 16 of these computers and build a supercomputer cluster, basically. And back then, again, we were very early adopters of Linux, and we saw the potential it had in both desktop and server computing. It was really ahead of its time back then. And again, Linux came out in 1991, so we were just starting to kind of play around with this in the mid to late 90s, and we got to see it grow quite a bit. In addition to the research and development team, we also operated a local dial-up internet service provider. Back in the good old dial-up days, this was a blast. We were one of the first places in Worcester County to have a T1 connection and a DS3 connection. When we first started, again, we had roughly 300 dial-up customers or so. And with our single T1 connection, which is only 1.5 megabits per second, not even enough to stream a Netflix video these days, we were able to support all those dial-up customers. And we also had 24 phone lines that came with that T1 connection. I think it's also known as a PRI. And in addition, later on, when we started growing even more and more, we eventually upgraded to a DS3 connection, which was a whopping 40 megabits per second. Back in the late 90s, that is unheard of, to have that fast of a connection. And that has a theoretical limit of about 672 phone lines. So we could have all those dial-up customers calling up Patmos International to get their internet access all at the same time. And if I recall correctly, too, I seem to remember some of the accountants talking about how much that DS3 connection cost. And I think it was around the tune of $30,000 a month to have that connection back then. So pretty crazy stuff. Patmos was a revolutionary company, and unfortunately, it took a lot of money to keep that place operational. They did go out of business, I think, in 2001, 2002. They finally shut their doors and liquidated all their assets because really there wasn't a huge business for these types of computers. It was a niche group of people that needed these types of machines, and it was very costly to do the research and development. But moving along the line here too, later in my career, I got heavily involved in website design and development, as well as computer repair and small business IT for another local company called Cards Computers. We had a little shop right there in Ocean Pines next to DeNovo's back in the day, if you guys remember DeNovo's before it became Don Seafood. And we serviced the customers of Ocean Pines. So if you ever brought in your computer for repair in the Ocean Pines area, it was most likely our company that helped you out with that. I might have repaired it personally. I've repaired about thousands of computers that came through the door. A lot of Windows XP machines. That's back when Windows XP was great. But in addition to that, really website design and development was where I learned a lot of information, especially about Linux. I helped a variety of small businesses here in Worcester County with website hosting, design, and development, as well as even some basic marketing. I hosted some Linux web servers that ran the Apache web service, as well as the MySQL database system, and did some PHP programming as well. We used to call that a LAMP stack. So that was a good time too. And now here we are, that moves us to today. I started my own company called Architects IT Services, where I offer a comprehensive suite of services for small businesses that need management over all their IT services when it comes to networking, server administration, backup solutions, website management, security software, Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace deployments, cybersecurity training, and a whole lot more there too. So moving along here, Let's talk a little bit about Linux. Before we even start talking about Linux, we can't go much further without mentioning Unix, because this is really where it all started. Unix was pretty amazing for its day. Just a little bit of history about that. Unix was created in the early 1970s at AT&T's Bell Labs by a team of programmers, most notably here Dennis Ritchie and Ken Thompson, these two gentlemen. They also created the C programming language. And if any of you guys are familiar with C, it is the mother of all programming languages. Just about everything that you think of has been written or derived from the C programming language. Their goal was to create a flexible, multi-user operating system for research and development that ran on old systems like the PDP-7 mini computer. I love calling it mini computer because we'll take a look at a picture of that thing. It was far from mini, but it was mini for back then, as well as the PDP-11 too. It did start off as a pretty modest project, but Unix really did grow into a powerful, portable system that became the cornerstone of computing and academia. And today, Unix and its derivatives remain embedded in all our daily lives, underpinning critical infrastructure, servers, and specialized systems. And even your phone runs a variant of Unix in some kind of way. So moving along here, let's take a look at the PDP-7 here. This is the PDP-7 mini computer. And roughly the size of maybe 3 or 4 refrigerators here. Let me admit Mark into the meeting. We got Mark on the line. Excellent. And so, yeah, this is the PDP-7 computer, very big machine. Now, what was kind of cool about this, in order to interact with it, there was no screen. We're looking off to the right here at a teletype machine, a teletype terminal of sorts. And what that would do, all of the computer's output would literally show up on paper. Here's another picture of Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie here standing in front of a PDP-11, much bigger computer, but it was more powerful as well. You can see they're typing at what looks like a typewriter. And the output that you would see on that typewriter is this. So like, for example, this is a connection to a Unix system. Here we are, we're looking at a login prompt where it says the word guest and you enter in your password. And then it's showing you welcome to the system here. This was on an AT&T Amiga computer. They released a special variant of Unix System 5 for that computer back then. And yeah, you can see it's actually connecting here over a network. There's an IP address. They're doing a telnet connection here. I thought this was really fascinating, actually. And this kind of came as a surprise to me later on in life, because I've been using Linux systems and Unix systems for many, many years, not really realizing what the origin of it was. I had no idea these teletype systems were actually used to create what are modern day serial connections to terminals and mainframes, to show you output on a screen. So like this is just fascinating to me. Here's another example. So, like those PDPs that we just looked at, these are dummy terminals, as they might be called in some places here. And these were meant to connect to mainframe computer systems or larger mini computer systems like the PDP. And they really didn't have any computing power in them. The whole purpose of these machines were just to connect to the server. And then you see the output on the screen. You could access the server's file system. You could create files, run applications, even play little console games and things like that. So it was actually quite interesting. These were very popular for many, many years, especially through the 1980s. I found this dummy terminal really interesting because, much like the ones we just saw, which connect to mainframe computer systems or mini computers, this one actually is connecting to a little device right here on the side, kind of like a Raspberry Pi. It's very similar to a Raspberry Pi, not exactly a Raspberry Pi, but it is connected to this dummy terminal's serial port, which to me is fascinating because here's a piece of modern technology that's connected to a really old dummy terminal using the same exact serial terminology that existed during the teletype era. It's just on a USB cable instead of a typewriter. So that to me is just fascinating when you kind of think about, how far we've come. Um, Again, being able to use the old technology with the new, it's all been compatible for the most part. So moving along here, this is actually what a terminal's kind of been transformed into. We're looking at just a terminal window. This is a screenshot from my Windows computer, and I've used the built-in terminal with Windows to connect to our Echolink VPN. This is something I've set up to access our Echolink VPN. I connect to this little machine every time we have a meeting. I'm just running a couple commands here, kind of shows you the version of Linux that it's running and the host name of the computer, the Raspberry Pi that I have connected there. And you can see I'm running a little command here called ls, which shows me the folders that are on this computer: desktop, documents, download, music, pictures, etc. And then I make a telnet connection here to the Echolink node itself. It's showing me some information here, the IP address. I put in the password, and then before you know it, I'm connected, and I've typed in another command here called conf, which shows the connection status of the Echolink node, and it shows a user that's connected, KC2NJ. It's our friend Mike up in New Jersey. So that just goes to show you, again, old school teletype terminals to modern day terminal access that we have here in Windows. It's still being used all the time today. Really cool stuff. All right, so, and move along here. And of course, we've kind of evolved past terminals in a lot of ways. Many advanced users are still using terminals on a regular basis, but this is a screenshot of 4 different desktop environments. Obviously, the graphic user interface became super popular in the late 80s and all throughout the 90s, and now we have a plethora of different systems here. In the left corner here is Linux Mint. This is a very popular distribution of Linux, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. Off to the right here is a Windows 11 graphic user interface. That's the desktop there. And of course, we got Mac OS here down at the bottom left. And then this was another distribution of Linux called Kali Linux. And this person kind of went crazy with their desktop and really likes to show off all the little widgets that you can display. So let's talk a little bit more about what is Linux in the first place. Let's go through this little write-up here. Linux was created in 1991 from the vision of a young student from Finland named Linus Torvalds, and he does pronounce his name Linus. It began as a personal project to create a free, open source operating system that was like Unix, but without the very expensive licensing costs. Let's talk about those licensing costs real quick. So again, AT&T and Bell Labs developed Unix, and when they first started coming, when it first came out, they actually licensed it for fairly cheap to colleges and universities. It was pretty affordable. But when Bell Labs had to split up, when AT&T had to split up into different companies, that's when they started to commercialize it. They wanted to make as much money as they could on this. And we're talking, if you wanted to use Unix in a commercial setting, it would have costed you thousands of dollars to run that on your own, like PDP or mainframe computer. Now, there were other projects at the time that were like Minix, for example. This was another kind of Unix clone of sorts, but it was underdeveloped. And Linus, he was very frustrated with its shortcomings. And he was like, you know what, I'm just going to make my own. And he's a computer science student. So yeah, he's like, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and make it my own. And I'm going to make it open source so other people can collaborate with me and help make this even better. And because back in 1991, personal computers were starting to become a lot more powerful with the introduction of the 386 and 486 CPUs, you might be familiar with that. He wanted to be able to use systems like Unix on his home computer outside the normal academic setting. Because usually, if you were using a PDP, You really couldn't, you had to be at the university in order to use it. Nobody had these things at home. Obviously, that would be massive. But his decision to make Linux open source was influenced by the free software movement, particularly the GNU project. GNU, pronounced GNU. It was started by a man named Richard Stallman in 1983, who created the core utilities. These were basically clones of all those Unix core utilities just to navigate the file system, like simple commands like ls, just to list the files that reside in a folder. Other commands too, like copy, cp, or mv, move, to move a file, and there's a whole list of other ones. Richard Stallman created free open source versions of those tools that could be ran on other Unix-like systems. Not to mention the GNU C compiler too. So, again, C was an incredibly popular programming language, and Richard Stallman made a free open source version of the compiler so that when you create a piece of code, you can have it run on just about any system and compile it for a system. So basically, what started as a hobby has grown into a global phenomenon, now powering everything from servers that host over 96% of all websites that exist today on the internet, as well as run on various PCs, desktops, smartphones, tablets, security cameras, a bunch of little IoT devices that you might have in your house, and so much more. It's really crazy to see how far it's grown over the years. Why do we want to talk about Linux today? I really feel like there is a massive correlation between ham radio and Linux, especially open source software, because I feel that they share similar philosophies with ham radio. For example, sharing is caring. Open source software, we like to share that code with one another, share it with the world and learn from it. We encourage collaboration with both ham radio and Linux too, by solving problems together and working on projects. And something I've said for a long time too is that even when coming into our club meetings, and I get to meet with all the guys here at the clubs, with the club, I feel like every time I walk through the door there, we're all either a student or a teacher with varying levels of experience. Some days I'll listen to the projects that the guys are working on, and I'm sitting there as a student learning from them. And then sometimes they might ask me questions, and in that case, I'm a teacher trying to help them. And that to me is really what it's all about there, being able to share our excitement for technology and the things we learn together, and sharing source code with things like Linux and all the various open source programs that are out there is really a way of being that teacher. Show the world how your programs work. And then you also are the student. You're learning from the collaborators that want to get involved and help improve it, much like our club and the members here of K3WRG. And so going back to Linux here too, there are so many distributions of Linux, so many different flavors. You make something open source and you encourage collaboration, then all these people want to create their own forks and make it their own. And that's beautiful. It's just like ham radio. Everybody's shack is different. Everybody likes to set things up differently. And Linux distributions are kind of a way of a coder that wants to make their own fork of something and make it their own way. So with that being said, that's all the history I wanted to go over here today about Linux. Today, I want to go over Linux Mint. Linux Mint is a very popular Linux distribution. It is great for beginners, and it's super easy to get installed and install programs, and even getting it working with all your ham radio related activities. So let me close out of the presentation here. All right. Open up a little browser window. And let's see. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. To get started with Linux Mint, we'll go ahead and just search for Linux Mint here. All right. All you got to do is go to linuxmint.com. Let's take a look at what we have here. It's showing us the latest version of the software. You can learn all about the project here and how it's all come together. We're just going to go straight into the download. All right, so we're at the ready to download screen here. There's a couple different editions that you can choose from. There's the Cinnamon edition, which is, like it says, the sleek, modern, innovative interface here. This is good for computers that have probably been made within the last 5-6 years. Stuff that is fairly modern. Maybe it's getting a little outdated. Maybe you have one of those Windows 10 computers that's ready to be decommissioned this October and you want to try something different on there. Cinnamon Edition is a great way to get started. If you have an older computer, or maybe you want to just have things lightweight as possible and you want to save as much of your system resources as you can, then the next edition down here, XFCE Edition, it boasts a lightweight desktop environment. It doesn't support as many features as Cinnamon, but it's definitely a lot lighter on resource usage. And to make things simple, any one of these is going to work perfectly fine for ham radio use, as we'll see here in just a little bit. The last one on the list here is the Mate Edition, which uses a classic desktop environment. You know, if you used Linux at all within the past 20 years or so, back in 2006 or so, there was a desktop environment called GNOME 2, and it still uses that same interface. But we're going to worry about the Cinnamon Edition here today, so I'm just going to hit the download button. And once you're on the download page here, just simply scroll down a little bit. You're welcome to read the installation guide if you want to find out some more information. But when we go down, I would recommend looking at the download mirrors here. The download mirrors are basically servers throughout the world that mirror the same files. So you could pick any of these locations and download the installer. I like to pick James Madison University, so that's right here in Virginia, so not too far away from us. And we'll go ahead and let that thing download. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this because I do already have it downloaded, but we'll talk a little bit more about what this actually does. If we look at the file that Linux Mint that I just downloaded here, it is a disk image file. It's roughly 3 gigabytes in size, and it is a ISO file. ISO files are basically disk image files that used to be used for copying CDs to the computer in one single file, but now they're used for a multitude of purposes. So in order, what do we do with this ISO file? We actually have to put this on a flash drive that can be booted on your other computer that you're going to put Linux on. So that's what I'm going to do today. You do need a special disk writing utility in order to write this image file to a flash drive. You can't just copy it. I have a flash drive down here called New Volume D here. This is, I think, a 8 or 16 gigabyte flash drive. So basically with that, what we do, there's a really popular program for writing these disk images. There's a whole bunch of them out there, but my favorite one, as far as ease of use and probably easy for you guys as well, is called Balena Etcher. If you search for Balena Etcher, you can see how it's spelled here, B-A-L-E-N-A, Etcher. They call it Etcher because it's writing or etching a image to a flash drive. And you can go right here and download the program. It's free. It works great. I'll show you how it works here. Once you have it installed, all you got to do is search for it on your computer. I have it installed already. And here's how it works. It's a simple 3-step process. You hit flash from file, and then we're going to choose that ISO file, that disk image that we just downloaded. We'll hit open. And then it's going to ask for what device do you want to write this to. In my case, I have a SanDisk USB flash drive plugged in my computer right now, but you could hit change. It's only going to list drives that you plug in through the USB port, which is great. Be very careful with this because I have accidentally overwritten like entire external hard drives of mine that I had a lot of important data on. So just going too fast sometimes, take your time, make sure you have the right disk selected. So once you have that, you just hit the flash button, and then we'll let that thing roll. It might ask for permission. You can click yes if it asks for permission. We'll just let it do its magic there. It'll take a few minutes to actually perform that task. There we go. We got a nice little counter there. And then she'll be ready to roll. So when this finishes, there's something important I wanted to show you that happens in Windows. If you just so happen to be using Windows to make this ISO disk image on your flash drive, there is something kind of silly that happens at the end that I'll show you here momentarily. But while this is going on here too, I'll be kind of curious. Does anybody here so far? I know there's a couple of us that I'm aware of. Anybody here in the group today? Have you used Linux in any way? I'd love to hear about it. If so, got any people want to comment?
Yeah, Mark, I've used it. I actually put that exact copy of Linux Mint on a Chromebook that I got at the Georgetown Hamfest, which is 99% working just fine. It's weird because I'm not really sure if you're really allowed to monkey with Chromebooks, but it works. So, hey, whatever.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
happy.
Chromebooks are great use cases for Linux. It does take a little bit of work, as you know, to get it working on there. Sometimes you basically have to root the device, but it's a great way to use an old Chromebook up, and especially if it's light on resources. We got Brian on the line here too. We got some hands raised. Brian, what you think there, man? How have you used Linux?
Well, I use it on the 6100, which is Linux based. So it's actually a radio and a Linux computer mashed together. So that's kind of my entry into Linux. So I'm glad you're doing this because it's going to make it a lot easier going forward.
Oh, beautiful, man. Thank you. Thank you. That's great to hear. And yeah, I love hearing about that, the Zygu 6100 and how it runs that custom version of Linux there on the device itself. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and how some guys use Linux to create prototypes of SDR devices. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. We have a raised hand from Mike there. Mike, what you got there for us?
I'm actually on Linux now watching this presentation. I use Fedora on my laptop full time. And of course, I administer several Linux machines at work, usually Red Hat / Fedora based. So I'm not overly familiar with Linux Mint, but they're not usually too different, just different looks.
Mm-hmm.
And I also use the HAMRS software for logging through Linux through something called AppImage. I'm not sure if you're covering that today. It would be a good future topic. If not,
definitely. Yep, we're definitely going to go over that today. And I appreciate you mentioning that there, Mike. I've had great conversations with Mike, especially late night Saturday RF sessions where we just kind of go crazy and talk about all sorts of nerdy details. And I appreciate that very much. And it is a passion. It really is a passion once you kind of get involved with Linux. It's a hobby in itself. It really is. So going back here to the Flash, it has completed, and luckily it has not prompted me for what I thought might happen. Sometimes in Windows, when you burn a Linux image to a flash drive, Windows becomes unable to read the flash drive at that point moving forward. You can see here, it's actually disconnected from my computer. It doesn't know what to do with it. Sometimes it'll even ask you, do you want to format this drive? And you definitely don't want to do that. So if you ever get a message after creating your Linux flash drive to format it, cancel right out of it because you'll just mess everything up, sadly, and you have to do it all over again. Long story short, it's a different file system than what Windows can recognize. So just go ahead and pull the flash drive out of your computer and go ahead and stick it in the computer that you're going to install Linux on. All right, so we're going to do something pretty cool here today. I have a very simple Dell Optiplex computer. these have been used in the business world for the past 20 years. You know, you see these all over the place, and they're a dime a dozen. You can find these on Facebook Marketplace now for about 40, 50 bucks in some cases. So computers like these are becoming very readily available. Businesses typically decommission these machines every 3 to 5 years. So you'll often find fairly new computers that are just sitting there, probably ready to go to the trash, ready to go to the dumpster. So if you find one, snag it up. Sometimes all you need to do is put a hard drive in that thing, and you're ready to go. We got a comment from Mike here. Go right ahead, Mike.
I don't mean to steal your thunder, but when you buy old computers for this, just try to get as close to a business system as you can, meaning no fancy graphics cards or other accessories, just a basic Intel system with it, preferably Intel wireless, just for the best compatibility.
That's a great suggestion, Mike. Yeah, appreciate that. Very good thought. Because you're right. Yeah, if you buy like an old gaming machine or something that has a fancy video card in it, you're gonna run into a little bit of struggle getting your Linux machine up. There are drivers and things you have to get set up here. All right, we got Mark back on the line there. You got your go right ahead there, Mark, with your comments.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, sir. We got you.
Okay. Sorry, I was trying to figure out on the iPhone how to do it because I don't have a mic in the garage. I just wanted to say, 1976, when I worked for Home Box Office, we used the PDP-11 that I used to program with paper tape punch, which ran Linux. It was very interesting. It controlled the switching of the satellites and the video for the evening for all the sports they did. But I used to be really good at Linux, but I haven't done it in years. Sometimes when I think about it, some of the commands come back, but I'd like to screw with it, but I haven't done it in so many years. But we used it both at CBS, and HBO used it extensively, even for editing. Their video editors were all done off of PDP-11.
Wow. That's amazing. I love hearing stories like that. Honestly, that's one of my favorite things about this subject because it goes back so far. And, that's one of my favorite things about working in technology too. I've heard so much about like the punch card days and using these PDP machines and how it really was revolutionary. Like if you were involved in computer science in any way back in the 70s and 80s, then you probably would have saw one of those things at your college. So really cool stuff. But thank you for your comments there, guys. I'm going to share my screen again here. This time we are going to, let me open my source projector. What I have here now hooked up to my computer is an HDMI capture card. So this computer that's right behind me that I just showed you is actually plugged in through a capture card, and we're going to be able to do a live installation of Linux right here on this stream. So I'm going to turn on the computer and we're going to be able to see it boot up. Now, before I turn this computer on, in order to, the flash drive that we just made is plugged into the computer, but in order to boot to it, we actually need to hit a special key combination that varies from manufacturer in order to boot to a different device other than the built-in hard drive that this computer has. This computer actually has a copy of Windows on it. So I want to overwrite that. I want to get rid of Windows altogether. I'm not even going to do a dual boot situation. I'm just going to erase the contents of the disk and put Linux on there. So again, we're going to turn this thing on. And then for a Dell, all Dell computers use the key F12. That's Foxtrot 12. It's on your F row up at the top of the keyboard. So the moment you see the Dell logo appear, you start hitting the F12 key repeatedly, and then the special boot menu will appear. And again, this can vary from manufacturer, from HPs to Lenovo's. They all have a different key combination. So you might want to Google that or look it up just to make sure you're ready. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn on the computer, and you should see a Dell logo pop up here in just a second. F12, preparing one-time boot menu. Let's see if we got it now. Yeah, there we go. Cool. So in my case, I have a Kingston Data Traveler USB flash drive. It shows it right there. Yours might be SAM or SanDisk or something like that. Whatever brand flash drive you have, it should appear under this boot menu here. One thing I will say is that, computers and their BIOS systems, they all kind of vary too. Sometimes you might need to disable features in your system like secure boot, or you might even need to enable an option called legacy boot in order to install certain versions of Linux. But for the most part, in my case, I turned off secure boot so that I could just kind of make sure I'm perfectly compatible with this version of Linux I'm installing on here. It does support secure boot, and all that really is a way that certain device drivers can talk to the BIOS to make sure they're secure and digitally signed by a legitimate manufacturer before your operating system actually loads. Virus creators and malware creators have really gotten sophisticated with their attacks, and they have managed to figure out ways to actually hack your computer's BIOS so that even if you were to format your whole machine, reinstall Windows, wipe it completely clean, a virus could still reside in your BIOS. So that's something to think about. That's why they invented secure boot, but you can turn that off. In my case, it is off, and we're going to go down here using our arrow keys. I went down to UEFI Kingston Data Traveler 3.0, and I'm going to press the Enter key. All right, and here we are at another boot menu. This gives you some other options here, more advanced options. We only want to do the first one for this particular demonstration, so we'll choose the first option for Start Linux Mint Cinnamon 64-bit here. All right, we're booting to the flash drive as we speak. I was thinking about originally doing this with a virtual machine because it would have been a heck of a lot easier than using a capture card, but I wanted to be able to demonstrate the information about the BIOS because, you can only really simulate that on an actual computer. So I thought that would be useful for us to use a real capture here. All right, here we are. So this is what's cool about this. We're actually booted in to a live operating system of Linux as we speak. I haven't made any changes to the computer. This is ready to use right now if you wanted to, and everything resides on the flash drive. So if I were to create any files, it would save them on the flash drive. This is a live operating system. You can use this right out of the box if you want. It is not installed on the computer. What I mean by that is if I were to turn the computer off right now and remove the flash drive, then Linux would be gone. So if you ever want to play around with Linux without affecting your system in any way, just put it on a flash drive and boot to it. You can play around with it right now. I can click on our little menu down here and use a whole bunch of applications that come pre-installed on here. So yeah, feel free to use that. If you just want to play around in a safe environment, you can do that. And most Linux distributions allow for that. They have live installations. But you can see they make it nice and easy for us. If we want to permanently install Linux on the computer's drive, the hard drive that's inside there, then just click on this little Install Linux Mint button. Wait for the install to load here. Just a couple little basic things that we'll go over. This is the easiest installation on the planet. That's why I wanted to go over this today, because other versions of Linux might not be so easy. One of the ones I showed in the list of distributions there is one of my favorite distributions called Arch Linux. And it doesn't even have a graphical installer. You have to do it all through a terminal or a console. It's all text-based. And to me, I like that. Whether or not you want a fully fledged desktop environment that's just like Windows in a lot of ways, or you want to configure every little thing from the ground up, Linux has you covered. So here we are. We're just going to pick English as our language and click Continue. You can choose different keyboard layouts. It already has English, United States selected for us, so we'll continue again. And here's an option about installing multimedia codecs. I usually go ahead and install this as well, just because if you're trying to play certain videos on your computer, you want to make sure they work correctly. Go ahead and do that. The reason why they even ask you this is because some of this software is proprietary. It might not be open source in some cases. So it's just kind of giving you a warning about that. If you want to be able to view certain videos, go ahead and install that. So we'll go ahead and click continue. All right. Cool. So here we go. The computer, it says, okay, so yeah, I apologize. It used to have Windows on here, but it says this computer currently has Linux Mint on it. And it does, because I did some testing. But prior to this, it did have Windows on there. And it gives you a couple options for how you want to install it. The first option is erase Linux Mint and reinstall, which is what we're going to choose. You could say install Linux Mint alongside Linux Mint, or previously it would have said install Linux Mint alongside Windows. So you can technically dual boot computers, but you kind of have to get creative with your disk setup. You have to create partitions or have totally separate disks, to install Linux on one and Windows on another. But it's my personal recommendation, especially if this is the first time you're doing it, install it on a system you don't really care about. Try it out first and just erase everything that's on that disk currently and do a fresh install. Matter of fact, I'm just going to use this option, erase disk and install Linux Mint. We're not going to reinstall anything. We're just going to erase the entire contents of the disk and then let it roll. So we'll hit install now. And it's going to ask for your confirmation to write these changes to your internal disks. Hit continue. That's your last chance. All right. And just a time zone setting here too. Pick New York since we're here on the East Coast. All right. So now we can set up our user account here. Again, hey, think about this for a second. Finally, an operating system where you don't need a Microsoft account just to sign into the computer. Hey, that's a thought right there. Also, yeah, you don't need a Mac or an Apple ID. You don't need a Microsoft account or a Google account. You just create a good old-fashioned local user account, which is becoming harder and harder to find these days. All right, so we're going to go ahead and call it the club's call sign. Why not? Well, this will be a K3WRG computer. And we'll use a super secure password that is totally not K3WRG. All right. Continue. All right. Now it's basically copying all the files from the flash drive to the local computer, the disk that's inside there. So usually only takes a couple minutes, and before you know it, we'll be able to reboot this thing, and we'll be running Linux natively on this computer. So yeah, so far so good. Any questions from you guys? So we got a comment from Mike again. Go right ahead, Mike.
While we're here waiting for the install, I just wanted to mention if you do decide to dual boot between Windows and Linux, you will have to change some settings for the times storage. Because Windows, when it stores the time in what's called your BIOS, it stores it in local time. Linux, by default, will use UTC time. As you boot back and forth, each OS will complain because the time is shifting 4 or 5 hours every time you boot.
That's a really good comment there, Mike. You're absolutely right. Linux does kind of prefer to use that whenever possible. We got a comment from Mark there, too. Go right ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell everybody, if somebody doesn't want to screw with their computer with Linux, I have a couple extra computers in my house, HPs, that the drive would be wiped. You'd have to do a clean install, but you're welcome to borrow them and play with Linux to your heart's content and not worry about your Windows. It's just a thought, and if anybody in the club wants to use it unlimited amount of time and pass it on to somebody else, that's fine with me. I just wanted to mention that.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. That's awesome. And likewise, too, I got a few machines here behind me that are just kind of wasting away. So there's always something to be found. we got a comment from Mike Winokur there too. Go right ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I noticed when you first fired that up, it started up in the upper right-hand corner was like identifying, saying adding printer, adding this printer, and adding that printer. Is that, were they just detected from the network, or did you have a list somewhere? Or
Yeah, since I'm here at my office right now, I'm in an office full of about 20 accountants, and they all have individual printers on the network. So yeah, Linux is it's smart enough nowadays to pick up those network devices and just kind of have them readily available for you. So that's one thing that's really cool. You know, there's some things you'll love about Linux that's even more superior than Windows, in my opinion. And then there's some things that might be a little bit more cumbersome too. But either way, yeah, that's one of those things where it will pick up network devices automatically. But yeah, even while this install is going on, you're welcome to play around with Linux too. There's even a terminal. Speaking of the terminals, you can click on this little black button down here. It looks like a little command prompt, and it opens up a live terminal that we can type in and interact with as we speak. So yeah, some funny little commands. You can type in W, for example, and that tells you all the users that are logged into this computer at the moment. There's the user Mint right there. That's the user that this live installation creates for us to use. Even gives us a little CPU load chart here too. Nothing too crazy. We can type in ls as well to look at the file structure a little bit. And if I wanted to look inside one of these folders, I'll type in cd for change directory. I can type in downloads if I want to look in the downloads folder. There's a nifty key that you can use in the terminal, which I definitely recommend you use. Well, if you just hit the tab key and you partially type the name of something, if you press tab, it'll automatically complete the rest of it for you, which is super, super helpful. So if I type in cd downloads there, now it has changed my working directory to the downloads folder. And I can type in ls again, and there's nothing in this folder, but you know, if there was something, we'd be able to see it. I could make something real quick too. This command touch actually touches the file system and creates a file that you specify. So let's just call it like file.txt. Touch. Cool. So now if I type ls again, what I just did, I used my arrow keys. The up arrow keys actually let you cycle between the previous commands that you typed in the terminal. So that saves you a lot of time there too. Look at that, our installation is finished. Before I reboot, I'll type in ls one more time, and there's that file that I just created. So now I could actually open this up if I wanted to. If I use my little file explorer here, I go to the downloads folder. There's that file I just made. I double click on it and it'll open up a little text editor since it knows it's a text file. Put in a little test, save it, close it, and there it is. Nice document ready to go for us. I can even look at that file here in the terminal too. I like to use this command called more. Type in more, then a file name. And again, I use tab completion so I don't have to sit here and type the whole thing in. And I press enter and it shows me the contents of that file. So pretty cool. Alrighty then. So the installation has it finished. Let's go ahead and restart now. And it'll remind us here too that once it's ready to reboot, it should ask us to remove the installation medium. So yep, we want to unplug the flash drive. All right. So now here we are, we're going to be booting into Linux directly from the hard drive that's inside that computer. You hear me see hard drive, it's actually a solid state drive, but I'm just old school, and any kind of drive that goes inside a computer to me is a hard drive, so pardon me for mixing up those terms. And solid state drives nowadays are so cheap. So if you do get yourself an old computer, and maybe it has an old conventional drive in it, the ones that have a spinning disk inside it, you know, get yourself a solid state drive for, geez, cheap as $20-30, and that thing will be smoking. So, all right, we're ready to log in for the first time. And this is something you won't see in the live environment. You know, we're actually at a login screen since we created a user account for K3WRG. I'm gonna go ahead and type in our super secret secure password. And we are here. We are in Linux natively now on this computer. I would definitely go through this little welcome screen the first time you put Linux Mint on your machine. It really does have some good information. It goes through some first steps here. You can customize your desktop, change the colors. You can see like this window right here is white, but the rest of my computer here it's kind of got a dark theme going on, which I like, I prefer. So if I wanted to, we can launch the desktop colors screen here, and it will allow us to change our window theme. So right now it's on a mixed environment. We got a mix of both dark and light mode, but I want it all dark. So we'll click dark, and you can see it immediately changes the window environment to dark theme. A little bit easier on the eyes. Some of these other steps, I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but yeah, if you wanted to be able to back your system up regularly, you could use these things called system snapshots. And also, if you're using any third-party devices, maybe special audio or video hardware, then you can use this driver manager to download special drivers for your computer. It works exceptionally well with NVIDIA graphics cards. So NVIDIA, they're really well known for creating drivers that are compatible with Linux. So if you're a gamer, this works great. Surprisingly, gaming has come such a long way with Linux. Pretty much everything that works in Steam, the Steam library, will work in Linux if you're using Proton. We'll go over that more later. But Update Manager here as well. We won't really dive into that, but here in the bottom right corner, you will see a shield that says the Update Manager. This will install updates for your computer as you need it. Linux usually does have a lot of updates, so feel free to, you don't have to install them right away, but you might want to look at them, make sure you're up to date in case there's some security concerns. System settings here too, the software manager. Let's look quickly at system settings. I'm going to launch this real quick. This is basically your control panel, where you can access all the different settings of your computer. You can access this too by using the Linux Mint menu. If I go down to the bottom left corner here and we click on the Linux Mint menu, I can access this at any time by hovering over this little guy here, and it says that this is system settings. It looks like a couple toggle buttons. If you click that, it will open up system settings. I got a couple copies here. Close out one. Again, we can access your themes, backgrounds, accessibility options if you need to be able to see things a little bit better, system notifications if you don't like that printer thing coming up, and you can turn off those kind of system notifications, screensavers, all that kind of stuff. Pretty self-explanatory. If you are using a Wi-Fi connection, you might want to check out your network settings. Linux Mint is smart enough to recognize that you have wireless connectivity, so it'll have a little right here. This computer does not have Wi-Fi, but if it did, it would show a network browser just like Windows does, where you can pick a Wi-Fi network to connect to. So keep an eye out in your system tray, this little bottom notification area, if you want to be able to access those settings. All right, so again, feel free to play around with this welcome screen. It is cool. There's a lot of great information here. One of the things I wanted to focus on today, we are getting a little over here on our time, so we'll jump right into how we install programs in Linux. There's actually a multitude of ways to do this, and every distribution is different. Linux Mint, we're really lucky. They have this thing called the software manager. It's basically like an app store. So this stuff used to never exist back in the day. So I'm just thrilled that we have something like this that makes it easy for everybody to install programs without the headache. So I'll just hit launch. And again, if you want to launch the software manager outside of this welcome screen, you can do it just by clicking on the Linux Mint menu. And on these little favorite buttons here up at the top, this guy right underneath the Firefox web browser is the software manager. It's going to pull open this little guy here right now, and we'll be able to search for programs to install. All right, here we go. And it looks very similar to, like the Apple App Store, for example. You can search for just about anything. If you wanted to put Discord on here, again, talk with the radio group, we'll go ahead and type in Discord. And then there it is right there, right at the top of the list. We got the Discord icon as well as a bunch of other Discord related applications. Some of these are libraries and things that Discord needs to work correctly, but you don't need to worry about that. Just click on Discord, and then it has a nice little install button right up top here. Just hit install. It's going to tell you, hey, these are all the other libraries and applications we need to make Discord work. Might want to review that just to be on the safe side. If you don't recognize any of this stuff, that's fine. Just go ahead and hit continue for now. But if you're a more advanced user, sometimes you want to double check what also gets installed when you're putting a program like this on. And yeah, it's installing as we speak. And that usually only takes a couple minutes. Discord is a kind of a big program. It's a one gigabyte program here, but before you know it, once this program's done installing, it will be immediately available under your Linux Mint menu. And it's super easy. This doesn't get any easier. All right, there we go. I'm going to dive into some ham radio apps here momentarily. So yeah, as of right now, I could, again, launch it right from there. Or if I go to the Linux Mint menu, I believe it's probably, it's under the internet category, but you could search for it too using this little search box. Just type in Discord. It's going to show you all the apps that are installed that come up with that search term. You just click on it, and then you're off to the races. All right, so yep. I'm not going to log in here, but if you wanted to, you could. And you'll have all the same access that you do on the Windows app or the mobile app. So yeah, ready to go. All right, so moving on to ham radio stuff. Let's go ahead. There is so much ham radio programs that exist in Linux. Some of the most popular ones, for example, are if you want to get into FT8, let's say you want to start diving into the world of digital modes for ham radio. Linux is a great platform for that. One of the most popular programs we use for FT8 is a program called WSJTX. It's a mouthful, but this is the most popular program for using FT8 on PCs. So WSJTX, we can click on that, and it's the same process. You just hit install. It's going to tell you about this other software it needs to get installed, and we'll just hit continue. Punch in our password. All right, and luckily this is a pretty small program, so it should not take too long to install. All right, there we go, ready to rock. So if we search again in Linux Mint, let's see where that put itself. I think it's probably under, for some reason it categorizes it under sound and video, but you can customize these categories if you want to. Not to mention, if there's a program you use all the time, you can right click on these guys and add them to your panel. And the panel is the little bottom bar down at the bottom, kind of like the Windows taskbar. It's like pinning something to your taskbar. Just hit add to panel. And then now we have an icon down here, a little shortcut to access WSJTX. And when you start this software for the first time, you do have to configure it, of course, and everyone's going to be a little bit different here, but I can show you just some basics here that you might want to consider. Under the file menu, there is a settings section. And there's really only two things that you need to configure in here. Well, three. Put your call sign in there. Of course, we'll put in ours, K3WRG. If you want to put in your grid, go right ahead. FM28JJ. That's pretty much where I'm at here. And then the next thing is the radio tab. This is where you're going to configure your cat control and push to talk options so that you can actually use this program to invoke the features of your radio. You want this program to receive whatever frequency your radio is tuned to. And You also want this to, when you're ready to send an FT8 packet, you want it to be able to invoke the PTT of your radio using this. So there are a ton of radios to choose from in this list, and hopefully yours is in here, because if it's not, you might have a little bit of a challenge here. So I'm going to scroll all the way down, and I'm going to pick my Yaesu here. I got an 891, Yaesu FT 891. And right underneath that, it's going to ask for your serial port. Now, this can also vary depending on your computer. Most modern radios now, they usually come with a USB cable to plug into your computer. And what that does, it creates a serial port that you have to specify here in this list. In this case, these are all local serial ports, but if I did have a USB one, it would, I would make sure it's plugged into USB. It might even say dev TTS 001 or something like that. There are ways to find out what serial port your device is using. There's a command called DMESG. You can type this in the terminal. But again, this is for a topic for another day too. We'll dive more into digital modes on one of our future sessions. But long story short, you can type this command in. It's going to show you every single device that's on your computer. And you can often, if you were to plug in your radio right now, and I run that command again, it's going to show me at the bottom here that you plugged in a USB device. Matter of fact, let's see here. Maybe I can plug this in. I'll plug in a flash drive. Okay, so I just plugged in a flash drive. Let's see if dmessage found it. Yep, it just spit out. I just ran the command again, and it says right here, new high-speed USB device found, manufacturer, Kingston. It's the Data Traveler product. It's cool. It shows you all the pertinent details about that device as we did that. But we'll save that for a future session there too. Lots of cool things to look at there. Again, there's some other settings. Your radio will vary whether or not you're going to be using these various PTT methods. I think for the 891, we use CAT instead of Vox. If you had an old school radio that has Vox capabilities, you might need that. But looking at the only other thing you need to configure between your radio settings and audio settings, I will say that with the radio settings, almost all major radios have been documented somewhere along the line on how to configure it with WSJTX. Again, a simple Google search. If I did a Google search right now for FT891 WSJTX settings, you will find a plethora of people that have set this up before and what options to check off in here. Sometimes I know for the 891, I actually use the data packet mode instead of upper sideband. The 891 requires this mode. But once you get that sorted out, the next thing you got to do is your audio settings, because the key to digital modes with ham radio is your computer's audio capabilities. You need both an input and an output. The input is going to be something like a microphone jack, or if you're lucky enough to have a line input jack, that's even better. The input takes the sound that your radio hears, the receiver from your radio. It pipes it into the computer so that the computer can also hear it. It needs to decode that information so that we can see real-time information on the screen about what that digital noise is. And then the output is the opposite. This is going to be your computer's speaker output in a way. And what that does, if I want to send a message through FT8, it's going to generate a bunch of digital noise, and it needs a way to output that from the computer through your radio's input. You're basically transmitting it that way, just like you do with your voice. When you hit the push to talk button on your radio, you're taking the audio from the computer, and it's almost like holding the microphone up to the computer and hitting push to talk and letting it transmit over the microphone. But there's more direct ways to do that, using these settings. So your results will vary again, and some of you might even be familiar with those digital mode boxes that you can buy. I don't know why the name's escaping me right now. There's like the rig control app, rig control devices. Sometimes those have their own sound card devices that get installed on here, and you have to look through your list. In my case, I'm just using the computer's built-in audio. I can choose also output, which is the analog. It's the speaker output jack. That's all that's saying. It's the speaker output. And then there's the input, the microphone input. It's an analog jack. So for input, I'll choose input. And then for output, I'll choose output. That's it. Now, this isn't going to work here right now because I don't have a radio plugged into this thing. But we're going to do another session where we talk all about how to configure these digital modes. But long story short, that's how you install a program. That's one of the many ways of installing programs for Linux. That's the easiest way to get started. You can actually install programs using, luckily Linux Mint uses what's called a package manager as well. You could go through here and install things right through the terminal. I could type in apt install apt is a way to access the package repository here on Linux Mint, and then I could just type the name of pretty much any application that might be in that same software manager that we saw, and that will give us a way to install an app through the terminal. So I could install Discord, for example. Type in your administrator password. In this case, Discord's not in the package repositories. It's actually in the software manager. So you could install something else if you wanted to. One of my favorite programs is BTOP. Let's see if it'll install. BTOP is a process monitor for Linux, and it went through that whole installation lickety split. Now I can just type in the word BTOP, and now I have this cool little graphic display of all the processes that are running on my computer right now, how much memory is being used, how much disk space is being used. Pretty cool. We'll go ahead and close out of this for right now. I wanted to show you something a little bit more practical. Let's look at the HAMRS app. Mike talked about this earlier. HAMRS uses a app image file to install, and this is a special process too. Let me go ahead and skip out of this. Setting up Firefox for the first time. You can just skip. All right. So HAMRS is one of the most beloved ham radio logging utilities out there. Very nice and easy to use. All we got to do is go to its website, hamrs.app. All right, so here we are. Every day is field day. Yes, sir. That sounds great. And again, like we were talking about before, one of the beautiful things about this program, it is cross-platform. It works on all these different systems, Mac OS, Windows, Linux, and even Raspberry Pi computers too, Raspbian, which is another custom version of Linux, custom distribution. We're going to download the Linux copy. And now you can see in the upper right corner, it's downloading the HAMRS program, and it has a .app image extension at the end of it here. And here in Google Chrome, here in Firefox, you can just click this little folder window and it'll open up the folder where that download is. Saves you a little bit of time. But again, it just puts it right in your downloads folder. So nothing to worry about there. If I were to double click on this file right now, nothing would happen. And I would be really sad. These app image files are fairly new development here in the Linux world, but they're basically kind of like a self-contained installer of sorts. In order to run this little program that I just downloaded, I'm going to right-click on it and then go down to the Properties option right here. And for security reasons, Linux doesn't like when you download an executable file from the internet. It's very suspicious of these files. So it wants to make sure that you really do want to execute this program that you downloaded from the internet. So we'll go to Permissions. This Permissions tab at the top of the screen here, there's a little option here for Execute. Allow executing file as program. That's all you got to do. We'll click close on that. And now we can double click on this file, give it a second. I don't recommend triple, quadruple clicking that because it'll run several different times. But here we go. We are running HAMRS as we speak. Self-contained app image, ready to go. We don't even have to technically install it. It's just ready. It's a portable application. So we are running it as we speak. And it's up here now too. If your computer is connected to the internet, it will download all the Parks database if you're going to do a Parks on the Air activation, and there's a lot of tutorials out there to talk about how to set this up. We'll go ahead and set this up for the club. K3WRG. We can put in our name. I'll just put mine for right now. Mark Shaw. All right. Now, one of the cool things about HAMRS, too, it does have integrations with websites like QRZ.com and also hamdb.org. So you could put in your QRZ credentials, and it will, when you start logging people's contacts, it'll automatically show their name and location as you type in their call sign. It's really cool, actually. So I'll go ahead and put in mine. One thing it does mention here too, it says QRZ does not provide grid square data to free accounts. Consider choosing HamDB as your lookup service if you want to populate the QSO map. That's a very important thing to realize too, because if you start logging all these contacts, if you want to be able to see that nice pretty map at the end of your day, unless you have a paid QRZ account, you're not going to be able to see that QSO map because these things do not populate the grid squares automatically. But we'll go ahead and just create a new profile here. And yeah, we're here at an empty logbook. So we can create a new logbook, call it anything we want. Let's call it Parks on the Air, and let's call it POTA. Give it today's date. I think today's the 16th, right? Yep. Cool. And we can choose between these templates. We'll use the Parks on the Air template here too. So we're ready for a POTA exchange. Click on our little logbook. And there we go. We are up and running. We're ready to start logging contacts as we speak. I could type in K3WOC. And we can put in their signal reports 5959. And if they have a park they're activating, we can put in their park. Got to make sure your frequency set here too. This is by default. You have to manually type in your frequency for this particular program. But if you wanted to get fancy, you can set up something called FL-Rig up top here. Again, that's a topic for another day, but that will allow you to automatically log the frequency based on what your radio is set to right now. So you don't have to type it in manually. But yeah, great program, highly recommended. Again, I just wanted to show that because it's a different type of program. It's a different type of installation. There actually was no installation. It's all contained in this app image file. We just downloaded it, had to make it executable, and then we could run it. And that's really it. So with that, again, just keep in mind your software manager, for installing programs. That's going to be the easiest way to go about installing programs. If you get more advanced with Linux and Unix in general, you can actually download source code directly from developers and compile it yourself and make all sorts of customizations and how it's installed. That's definitely not for the faint of heart. If you're more of an advanced user, you can certainly do that. There's a lot more customizations you can do, but for the most part, the software manager is a great way to get up and running, and a lot of your favorite applications are already here. Matter of fact, OBS Studio, I'm using that right now to broadcast this capture from the computer I'm installing Linux on. So OBS Studio, Audacity, great sound recording program, multi-track sound editor, fantastic. There is so many programs that you can download and start using for free right now. And with the discontinuation and the sunsetting of Windows 10 coming up here in October, they're going to no longer be releasing any more updates for Windows 10. If you're looking for something to do with that old computer, you put Linux on there. Or maybe you're buying a new computer and you're just sick and tired of Windows 11. You don't want to create a Microsoft account or have anything to do with their ecosystem. Linux runs amazing on brand new computers, and you will really be able to get your bang for your buck because it uses a lot less resources. There's not a bunch of background utilities that are spying on every single thing you're doing on the computer. So there's many benefits to using this system. So with that there, guys, that's pretty much all I wanted to go over today for today's presentation. I would love to take a few minutes here before we wrap things up. If there's any questions you guys might have, feel free. Questions or comments are certainly welcome here at this time. All right, Chris, go right ahead there, sir.
Yeah, just a quick comment to not be afraid of Linux. I know virtually nothing about computers, but the way that I do it, I call it cookbook Linux. I basically just watch people on YouTube and they go step by step and say, here, type this command and type this command. And, things tend to work out pretty well for me. So, yeah, if computers aren't your thing, a lot of people, I think they don't want to do Linux because they're like, oh, well, I need to know all those commands. Nah, you don't. I don't know any of them. I just follow somebody else doing it. Anyway, that's all I have.
You're exactly right. There is a plethora of resources out there. And, I highly encourage you all to look up your own little tutorials and how to do things that you want to do with Linux and find a good purpose for it. Because it's an amazing alternative, but for some people, this has just been their way of computing for years. You don't have to follow the mainstream. You don't have to always be a Microsoft or Apple guy. There are other alternatives. Much like Linus Torvalds decided back in the early 90s, even though MS-DOS was popular and Microsoft was just showing themselves on the scene, he wanted to do something different. He was a Unix guy, but didn't really want to pay for all those licensing costs. We got a question there from Dave. Go right ahead there, sir.
Hey, Mark, I just wanted to say I've got to run, but thank you very much. It's been really informative. I took a lot of notes, and I'm looking forward to playing around with it.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Dave. Excellent. I'm glad you got some good use out of it there, sir. And thank you for joining us. You have yourself a wonderful day.
See you soon.
All right, take care. All right there, guys. Well, anything else there? Mike, did you have any other follow-up questions? Or are you guys all set for today?
I was going to say that you did a great job. You broke it down. You made it easy to understand. So kudos.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. And of course, if any of you guys are looking to explore and do this yourself, I'm more than happy to provide any assistance that you would like for that. And again, even if you need a spare computer you want to play around on, I got about a stack of them over here too. So old laptops, old Chromebooks, old desktops, they make great use cases for Linux. So all righty then, guys, if there is nothing else, then we will go ahead and conclude today's presentation. I really thank you all for joining us today. It's been a wonderful morning. Great way to start a Saturday here. And with that, we will look forward to seeing you guys at our next club meeting. That's coming up on September 3rd. Wednesday, September 3rd. We're just a couple weeks away. I'm so glad that we're going to be back in session with the club. We got all sorts of great events happening in the fall and winter this year. So we'll look forward to seeing you guys then. All right, everybody. Well, take care for now. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of the weekend. We'll go ahead and end.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Take care.
Thanks,
Good
Mark.
to see y'all.